I think it's incredibly important just from a collaborative perspective, these last few years especially. It's just like it is with our students when we're helping colleagues, we just need to see the person behind the title. Whether they're a physics teacher, whether they're a third grade teacher, whatever their role is, to see the person. And so, just like we would with our students, we need to know what motivates them, what affirms them, how do they feel connected to their work, and enter there.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to episode 3 of season 5 of Leading Through Unprecedented Times. I'm Tom Murray, your host for this Future Ready podcast, and so excited to introduce you to Suzanne Dailey. Suzanne, what an honor it is to have you on. I have to tell you, I was recently at ASCD where we reconnected. I hadn't seen you in a long time, and I walk into your session. I saw you were doing a session. I open up the door, and my first thought was like, I got nowhere to sit. And I literally had to sit on the floor. Hey, I'm not complaining, but I had to sit on the floor in the back corner in about 3 square inches of space because you were crushing your presentation. People were all over the place, packed, jam-packed to get in. It was far beyond fire code, but that speaks to you. That speaks to your work. That speaks to the theme we're going to talk about today. But even though I really couldn't see you, or I couldn't see much at all, I enjoyed listening to you that day. And I know our listeners are going to enjoy listening to you today on our podcast. How are you, my friend? How you doing?
I'm good. It's good to see you. We had a good time in there, right?
We did. It was crazy. What a great conference, great event. Here, talk to us a little bit of your listeners. Just tell us who you are, what your role is, what you do, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Yeah, so I'm joining you outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania from the Central Bucks School District. We're the 4th largest in the state, and I get to be an instructional coach in our 15 elementary buildings. So that's teaching lessons and running workshops and, just working alongside like 500 of the greatest elementary educators on this planet. It's the best.
That's awesome. And shout out to your district. That's close to home for me. And I have all the world of respect for the district, the people that lead it, the work that you were all doing. Going back to that ASCD conference, the presentation that I walked into was called Lead Happier. And I'm wondering if the title sucked people in because we know the stressors, just the chaos of our world, the shots that our school and district leaders seem to be taking across the board. Talk to us about when you presented Lead Happier, you share that, districts will bring you in to work with their folks. What does that mean? What does that look like? You talked about these shifts that folks can make. Talk to us a little bit about that. What does that look like? What are some of the shifts that people can make to ultimately lead happier? If I'm a teacher in a classroom, teach happier, which is one of your kind of go-to mantras.
Right. So when we think about whatever our important role is in education, some of us are administrators, some of us are coaches, some of us are teachers. It's hard work right now. It's always been hard, but these last few years, as the series is showing, is just been challenges that we could never anticipate. And so when we talk about walking into that work feeling a little happier, what we mean by that is contentment and alignment and balance, making sure that our inner values are matching our outer actions and our outer words. And that sounds like a really heavy lift, but what we've been uncovering through the work of positive psychologists is these are like 2-degree shifts, Tom, right? You heard about them in the session, that it's really small shifts in our thoughts or our language or our actions. And when we consistently practice those, we are better able to serve the students in front of us, our colleagues besides us, our families at home. It transcends into everything. Our work is just so people-y, so human, that in order to be present in both places, at home and at school, it's these really small shifts that can really help make a difference.
Yeah, I love that. We were one of the things I really respected about just listening to you speak on this topic is it wasn't some 50,000 foot, just sounds good, philosophical, just do this. It was not that at all. You can constantly connected to research and connected to the research on the brain and how people think and to mindset. Talk to us, if you would, a little bit about just some of those pieces of it, whether research or, how it's really grounded, the notion of teach happier, lead happier, how it is grounded in research. What's that look like?
Well, it's just so exciting. The grand steps that positive psychology, neuroscience, neurobiology has taken us over the past 15 to 20 years, we can understand so much that some of our happiness baseline, as they say, is predetermined. It's just how we're wired, right? Like before we jumped on the call, Tom, we're talking about our kids, and everybody's wired a little bit differently. But it's so empowering to know that we have so much say into how we move through the seasons in our life, whether they're wonderful and exciting, happy seasons, or they're really challenging and difficult as well. And how do we move through those seasons in the healthiest headspace and heart space as possible? Some stuff we can't control, but we can absolutely influence the way we move through them. And I find that so empowering. And I think of that and it sounds so hard, but it's not. It's just entering just a little differently or a very small shift in our perspective that can really help us look at things as rational optimists and understanding that we're not doing life wrong. If things are hard, we're actually probably doing it right because we're leaning into our work and our people at home and at school. And it's just a really small shift of we like to say they're 2-degree shifts because busy educators have no time for a 180-degree anything, right? We're not looking for a complete 180. We're looking for a complete 7. That's all the capacity we have to do. And so through the podcast, through the book, through the workshops you're talking about, that's what we try to uncover. What are the things that we have the capacity for? And how does that help us show up in as healthy as we can for at home and school?
Yeah, I love that. One of the things I heard you address, and just thinking at social media, I'm sure you get all the time, or people may bring up on this notion of teach happier. You mentioned this notion of like toxic positivity when you brought up the irrational. Say it again. The irrational. You just used the
Rational
word.
optimist.
Yes,
That's
thank
coined
you.
by Sean Acor.
Yes, and I want to talk about Sean in just a little bit as well. And you contrasted the two, right? In looking at, and I loved your mindset around that because I fully believe, and I see the world as you do when it comes to this. I believe we have to choose our lens every day. Like if we want to see negativity in our world, we're going to see it all over the place, right? If we want to see positivity in the world, just look next door, look around you. It is all over the place, and we have to intentionally choose our lens. But I love that phrase that you used from Sean. But then I remember in your presentation, you brought up that notion of, well, toxic positivity, because people bring that up. And so if somebody said, well, that's just toxic positivity to you, how might you respond to that? Because I know school and district leaders sometimes balance or get that pushback of like, it stinks right now. Things are really hard right now. Don't try and get me to think positively. That's being, toxic positivity. What might you say to that? How might you respond to that? Because we see that a lot on social media.
Yeah, it really comes down to the word and. Things are really hard, and I know what my next right thing is. We started off, I don't think you were in the room yet, Tom. We started off by asking, what is the number one rule of whitewater rafting? And so everybody has all these great ideas that are all wrong. Wear a life jacket, don't go alone, like all these like beautiful metaphorical and sometimes just logistical rules. But the number one rule in whitewater rafting is be a part of your own rescue. If you happen to fall off the raft, you have to discern your next right thing. Do you swim to shore? Do you follow the current? Do you try and grab onto somebody? And that's our metaphor for feeling a little more content, aligned, and balanced. It's an inside job. And it's a bit of a discipline, which people don't like to hear, but that's just a fact, right? We want to be better at anything. We have to prioritize and we have to put in the work. So if we want to move through our days a bit happier, a bit more rationally optimistic, well, that's going to take a little bit of work, but it's not hard work, it's consistent work. And once we're committed to doing that and we start seeing the benefits, in both of our worlds, our professional world, our personal world, then it helps us commit to that a little bit more consistently.
Yeah, I love that. If I was going to name a book to release this year, it would probably be the name of the book that you released this year through ASCD, Teach Happier This School Year. I can't imagine the amount of, and shout out to ASCD for their publishing of that. I can't imagine a teacher not picking that up and just seeing the front cover, and shout out to your new release, by the way, and saying, I need to read this book. how can teachers feeling down, feeling, tapped out, emotionally tapped out, beat up from the politics of our world, when they open up that book and start looking through the pages, what are some of the recommendations? What are some of the ways that you're encouraging them to teach happier this year? What does that look like?
So it's important to know that I teach every day. So I'm not just talking the talk here. I know that the things we did 5 years ago aren't working with the kids of today. And so that constant adjustment and trying and having to backtrack a little bit, it's so exhausting. You know this, Tom. You're in classrooms all the time. And so the way that the book is organized is in four marking periods because if you're an educator, since you've been 5 years old, we've been living our lives through a school calendar year. So they're little excerpts that are supposed to be read if it works for anybody's schedule, like on Sunday night when those Sunday scaries set in. And it's a 2 to 3 page excerpt that's just a small invitation based in positive psychology of what are we going to do this week? What's that small shift in thought, language, or action to try just to help, understand ourselves a little bit better and understand how we can be a part of our own rescue. And it goes in the calendar year. So we've got optimism and we are well rested in September, right? And then in October, when we're all sick and everything is routine, we acknowledge that as well. And so the small shifts kind of match the time of year that it's shared. So right now, early May, what are we talking about right now? That the fourth quarter is ours, right? Just like in college football, they hold up the four and they're signaling to each other, whatever the score is, we're up, we're down, the fourth quarter is ours. We are going to take control over how we're going to end this game. That's us right now as teachers. Whatever our student population is, whatever progress we've made, however far we are in that curriculum map, we're probably behind more than likely, but we can recognize that, all right, we still have weeks in front of us. We still get to determine what our legacy is going to be with the students in front of us and how are we going to end this year as strong as possible, but not in a toxic positivity way, as you mentioned earlier. It's as a rational optimist. We're counting our wins, we're acknowledging our losses, and we're discerning our next right thing to end this year as in the healthiest space as possible.
Awesome. Absolutely. And I love that book. Love the way you have that broken down. Incredible read. And if you're somebody listening to the podcast, I encourage you to check that book out. Great work with that. And congratulations. I know it's a pretty new release. The other piece, and we were talking before we started recording here on just if I'm somebody that's really struggling or really just, hey, I'm doing pretty well, but I want to make sure I finish this year strong or I start next year strong. Your book is certainly one great resource, but I also know you have the Teach Happier podcast. Where are places that folks can go? Talk about your podcast. What else do you recommend? We truly have such a mental health crisis, and I don't want to pretend that a single book can overcome the true mental health issues that are out there, but it absolutely is a support. It's a help. So talk to us a little bit about your podcast and any other places that you'd point people to that may be struggling with just getting to work each day and bringing their best each day, just feeling totally tapped out. So first, tell us about your podcast a little bit.
Podcast is it drops every Sunday night, and it's 5 to 7 minutes tops. It never has exceeded 7 minutes. And again, it's usually a little story and then a small shift in our thoughts, language, or actions. That's based in positive psychology. So just this week, it's episode 99, big week because we're almost at 100, and it's a one word shift this week, Tom. It was when we ask somebody, how are you feeling? Shifting that to what are you feeling? And it seems so silly, but we kind of unpack a little bit about how it takes some of the pressure off when we ask a student or we ask a family member or we ask a colleague, what are you feeling? Kind of depersonalizes it, allows them to share in a less vulnerable way. And it just gives us some insight as to what people are going through right now. And right now we're tired. We see the finish line, but it's still so far away. And so when we go from that one word shift of how are you feeling to what are you feeling really helps us dig deeper into some of our interactions at school and at home. And so worldwide, we're up to, I think, 53 countries that people are listening to the podcast, which we were saying earlier before we logged on, Tom, that's not a yay, Suzanne. we have an issue here. This is not a Pennsylvania problem. It's not an America problem. It's a worldwide issue where educators, they are hungry for collaboration. They're hungry for people to say, me too. I see you. I hear you. What you're going through is valid and shared. That type of community has never been needed more. And the podcast is allowing folks to connect in a really authentic, um, realistic way.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things that we talked about at ASCD, because we both have a bit of a brain crush on Sean Aker. You had met, I know you got to meet Sean. I've
I
met him in the
did.
past as well. Brilliant, brilliant man. One of the things, and you actually referenced him multiple times in your presentation. Talk to us, because he's somebody I think as well that really aligns with the way you see the world. I think he's a great resource for others. If there was one takeaway or one thing that you'd recommend to listeners around this notion of mindset and teaching or leading happier, connect that to Sean, just maybe something you really respect or a takeaway, just to be able to share some of his work there as well, because I know that that's what you do.
He's always been my favorite teacher when it comes to positive psychology, just because of the way he makes it so accessible to just a regular old person like me, right? And so and he talked about this in the closing address at ASCD, was the importance of gratitude. That's the most impactful 10 seconds of my day. Knowing that at the end of my day, I'm going to write down something that I'm grateful for. I use an old school journal. I've been kicking it like that since 1999, Tim. But lots of people now use apps and, a more modern way. But what that allows me to do during the day is scan for what's going right or what's going well. And then when something really great happens, like I'll tell you right now, this conversation is going to go in my gratitude book tonight. I recognize it in real time. It allows me to acknowledge it and savor it just a little bit more, be anchored and present in the actual moment. And then at the end of the day, I walk through my day and I'm looking for those bright spots. And now I've trained my brain to notice them when they happen, recall them at the end of the day, and then record them someplace. And so what's really neat is what I'm doing now is I have a 5-year journal. So tonight, when I write the happiest moment of May 2nd, 2023, I'm going to see the happiest moment of May 2nd, 2022, 21, and 20. And that's really training my brain to know that good things have happened in the past. Good things are happening right now. And that's training my brain to understand that I should anticipate and expect good things in the future. That's not toxic positivity. That's not ignoring the hard things that are happening, but it's choosing to focus on what's going right. And Sean Acor says that any moment can be minimized or maximized depending on the attention we give it. So I'm going to choose to pay attention to the things that are going right and well. And I'll tell you what, it's real easy to do on good days. It's really difficult to do on challenging days. But as we share with our students, when we ask them to do gratitude journals in school, when it's a really hard day for them, just like us, but we still have to mine for that good thing, that's some of the most empowering work that we can do, because it's showing us that even on our hardest days, if we can find one good thing. Just the other day, for a student named Jackson, the one good thing was we went outside for recess. Write that down. That counts. And if we can train ourselves and empower our students to find the simplest, what would think of very mundane things to be some of the best parts of a well lived life. We are empowering kids at 8. And what that will look when they're 18, 38, 78 is just a really exciting thing to think about.
Yeah, I love that. Just being practical and thinking about
Yeah.
that notion of intentional gratitude. I'm a huge believer in that. And one of the workshops that I do, 2 activities just to give folks ideas as well. One is just bringing thank you cards for every participant. Maybe you're a principal listening, bring a set of thank you cards, hand one to every teacher, and give them some time, even just 5 or 6 minutes, to write a thank you card to another staff member, somebody that's encouraged them, supported them, help them, see the positive in a situation they were really struggling, and give them 5 or 6 minutes to simply write a thank you, and then give them a timeline. Hey, don't I'll give it today, and in the next month, slip that in the person's mailbox or whatever it might be. Another one recently is taking a sheet of paper, just as another idea, and maybe a faculty meeting kind of idea, putting the person's and personal authentic. I use the heart image, so I put the the person's name in the middle of it. They wrote their own name in the middle of it, and they got up and they all rotated seats, and they went to each person's paper and they wrote one or two words about what they loved about that person, what they appreciated about that person. And then after a period of time, they went back to their seat, sat down, and they had 40 or 50 characteristics about what people loved. And I will tell you, there were instant tears by multiple people. And I think that notion of just showing intentional gratitude, because it's so easy to look at, the glass is half empty. And it's really that notion to me of the glass is half full or is the glass half empty, but also recognizing like the glass is refillable, right? And we're going to have those moments where we're not feeling so hot. It's okay to have those days, like you're saying, but recognizing sometimes we also need to step back, gain some of that perspective, and take a deep breath. And in some cases, seek the help that we need. And that's certainly okay as well. One of the things you've mentioned multiple times, we really started with it, and I keep coming back to, I love your notion on the small shifts that people can take, because big shifts seem overwhelming. Sometimes we might listen to a podcast, listen to a speaker, and you get this notion of like, oh my gosh, like I got to change everything that I do. I got to start all over. And then we don't even know where to start. So I love your idea of these small shifts, and you've given a couple of them here. If I'm a leader listening to this, what might be some small shifts that they could take, just one or two, besides the ones you've mentioned already, just in their leadership to support some of this work, to look at things differently, to help their teachers? You talk about how taking care of teachers helps our teachers take care of kids, right? What's one or two other small shifts that folks can take there?
Well, I'm trying to think about the intentional gratitude that you just shared. And the best thing about that is not only does the person receiving the note, their happiness increases, well, so does ours by writing that note. And so, kind of like smashing a conscious act of kindness with an act of gratitude is so wonderful. And I know a lot of your listeners are very busy administrators. And in my unique role as an instructional coach, I'm kind of like the middle of that Venn diagram. I'm a teacher, but sometimes I'm in that other world. And in 15 buildings, it's hard sometimes to connect and show gratitude with as many people as I would want. So, a small shift in action, I use my reminders app. And anytime I'm in a school, I'm going to jot down somebody's name and either something I heard in the hallway when I was walking by, or just something that I know if somebody says to me, "Oh gosh, Amy was so helpful. She helped me do fill in the blank." Well, I'm going to write to Amy. It goes in my reminders app and it's going to sit there. I don't have the capacity to address it that moment, but then when there's a little bit of downtime, right? Or I'm waiting for the next meeting to start, I open that reminders app and that's when a text or an email, that's when it goes out, and it's a very specific intentional act that is going to not only make that person happy, but my own as well. And just building that community is so wonderful. 30 seconds at a time. But as long as it has a home, right? Whether it's in your notes app or reminders app or wherever, just gives it a space to be so that when we have the time and capacity to do it, we're ready to do something very intentional.
Yeah, I love those moments. And I really appreciate the notion of how many times, and just reflecting myself as you speak, how many times do I also walk right by those moments? How many times do I get so consumed with me and my and I and looking in the mirror that I walk by the moment to encourage, to support, to love on somebody else? And so I appreciate that. Let me ask you, and I'm almost afraid to ask this because it's such a large topic in your work around instructional coaches, but looking at our time, I can't not ask you about it because it's your world. We have an instructional coaches strand with Future Ready Schools that we want to continue to grow and take a look at. Talk to instructional coaches, if you would, for a moment. Obviously, it's what you're doing every single day. In terms of the importance of the work, the value in the work, because when I speak to instructional coaches, so many times they feel so flustered, and not through a fault of their own. They're, hey, I'm trying to support two different schools and be in all things to all people all the time, and I can't be in all places all the time, and just the struggles that can be there. Talk to instructional coaches a little bit. Give them some encouragement on their role, the importance of the role, and just how you see the importance of the role and how they serve.
I think it's incredibly important just from a collaborative perspective, these last few years, especially. It's just like it is with our students when we're helping colleagues, we just need to see the person behind the title, whether they're a physics teacher, whether they're a third grade teacher, whatever their role is, to see the person. And so, just like we would with our students, we need to know what motivates them, what affirms them, how do they feel connected to their work, and enter there. It's not necessarily the way we would want to. initiate a lesson or start a conversation. But once we see the person behind their title and behind their role, then we're able to connect with them at a deeper level. And that's when the real good work gets done. We work with folks who want to work with us. We work with folks who don't necessarily want to work with us. And so when I'm working with a group of instructional coaches, I steal a question from Dr. Brene Brown that if we're working with someone who is not excited to be with us, because it's true, it happens, we just ask them, what does support look like to you? We give a nice big open question. We hear them. They're going to vent. It kind of gives them the green light to do all those things, but then they have a say as to what our next right thing is together. And then it gives us a starting point of where to begin.
I love that. Love that question. I'm even thinking about the connection to that from principal to teacher,
Hmm.
superintendent to principal. What does
Sure.
support look like to you? Brilliant question. All right. As we wrap up here, I always love to wrap up with just a piece of advice that you have. So let's go back to this notion of lead happier or teach happier. No matter where somebody may find themselves today as they listen to them, what's just one piece of advice? And you've given us so much and so many different practical ideas and thoughts, which we've loved. Just one piece of advice from your heart to all the school and district leaders are out there right now, just knowing the chaos of our world, the politics of our world, where they are, no matter where they find themselves on any sort of continuum, a piece of advice that you have regarding their leadership and just continuing to move forward and end this year strong.
One piece of advice would be just as we see the person behind the title of whomever we're working with, see the person behind your own title, right? And to understand that it is virtually impossible to be work life balance, killing it at home, killing it at work. But we can have work life satisfaction. That's realistic. That's attainable. And depending on the time of the school year, depending on what's going on with our own families at home, it's okay if we're not 50-50. I actually can't remember a day where I was 50-50. And to give ourselves the grace and permission to not look for that balance, look for that satisfaction, and whatever our capacity is for that day, give that much. Today, I've got 95% capacity. If I give 95, that's 100. Some days, Tom, I'm looking at a strong 20. But if I give that 20%, it's like giving 100%. Give ourselves grace, give ourselves time, and understand that there is a person behind our role. And we have to take care of that person in order to fulfill our role in a healthy headspace and heart space.
Absolutely love it. Suzanne, how can everybody connect with you if they want to reach out?
We can connect. Everything's Teach Happier. The podcast is Teach Happier. The book is Teach Happier. Facebook group, Instagram is all Teach Happier. So, and Twitter is Daily Suzanne. So I look forward to connecting with more folks through this. Thank you, Tom.
Awesome. That's Suzanne Dailey, everybody. Suzanne, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you. See you soon.